Hello and welcome back. So after I did all sorts of other stuff and didn't do anything Warhammer related for years, literally, I thought I might give it another try and get back into the hobby. Since the summer is going on for too long already, winter will come, and why not get back into some wargaming stuff. So I thought I would start with building the models, since I realized I have quite a lot of those. I bought a lot of those big boxes, those starter sets. I think the last I had was Shadowspear or something like that, or where you get lots of Space Marines and usually some opponent. Right now I think it's Tyranids, and when I bought that it was Space Marines and Death Guard, I think. And I do have some Chaos Marines as well, still to be done. So let's do this. My original idea was to just take some of the regular models from the sets that are still to be done and use those, and then I thought, maybe I should have something special, like one of the officers, the lieutenant or lieutenant, whatever you prefer. So I bought this extra model, the one I just showed you, this one here. And then I figured out that exactly the same model is of course part of the spruce that I still had lying around. So all of a sudden I have at least two of those unbuilt lieutenants. So I thought, well, then I would just compare those and see if there is any difference between the set and the single model. So if I compare that, it is not exactly the same layout. A little bit different, and apart from that it looks very, very similar. I sometimes had the impression that maybe the ones from the big kit from the set here are a little bit softer in the details, but that looks very, very similar here. And looking at the parts, you see it's the other way around. It's not exactly the same model for whatever reason. Well, anyway, let's try to get that built up. I already mentioned those starter kits, and I think it's a very good idea or a good way to get into the hobby, because you get a lot of models and all the rest of it that is necessary to play a game. I have not everything on hand anymore because I did that years ago, but if I remember right, you got the rule sets, you get some story behind the whole thing, you get even the dice and a measuring tool or things like that. So we will look at that when I make a video about how to play the game and want to go over the rules. But you get a lot of models, and it's enough to build a small army and just get into the game and play something. And in addition, it's usually two factions. Like I said, maybe the Space Marines and the Death Guard, or Tyranids, or whoever. So you get two factions that you can either try out yourself or share that with somebody else. I remember that at least once I sold all the Death Guard part because I didn't need those. And that way, I mean, let's face it, the whole Warhammer hobby thing is quite expensive, but that is a way to get into the whole thing for a reasonable price, let's say like that. And then you can just do what I'm doing right now, assemble a couple of models. It's not too many, it's not like the huge army at once. And yeah, it's just a good idea to try it out and see if that is really what you want to spend your time and money on. So I just worked a little bit on the pose, but I think we just leave it this way. That's the problem of those newer models. They are really monopose. I think maybe saw how the arms are attached and things. There is no way to change much of that, or at least it takes a lot of craftsmanship. And very often, there is just one piece and a lot of detail is molded into that piece, and it's like take it or leave it. Wherever else there are models that have different options, it's usually somehow laid out or marked on the manual, which is just a piece of paper here that is the entire thing, and there's just how to assemble that. But sometimes they have that in, I don't know, maybe green, and it's extra marked that you have different options, so then you should figure out which model or which version of it you want to build. And apart from that, yeah, this is basically it. Take a few parts, get rid of the sprue gates and the mold lines on it as far as possible. I usually overlook something. Glue it in the way that you want, the poser version if possible, and that is number one. Okay, those guys are obviously different in different poses, so it's not exactly the same thing, which is nice because at some point it's going to be repetitive. One thing I should probably mention, and I should probably prepare better, is if you want to have sub-assemblies and just leave some parts off. Like here we have one of the incinerators or something, the guys with a big plasma gun, and they have that thing very close to their heart, quite literally. And here's one where I attached the gun, and at some point you want to paint this huge eagle here on the breastplate, and it's of course easier to get there without the gun in place. So that is an option, but these two guys, I mean, the pose is really good for painting anyway, so that should work without a problem. Yeah, and the other thing about the poses and the repetition after a while is that these little pegs here where you glue the arms or all other sorts of parts here, yeah, they don't allow for much of a variation, right? It's either this pose or nothing, sort of. Of course you can cut them off and try to get something else, a different arm with a different weapon or something, into position into that same spot. But there's a lot of parts usually already attached to a certain model, and only one, of course, and the others are different again, and that means, yeah, it's probably not gonna work. Like here we have a body with all the pouches and the pistol and stuff attached there. Yeah, that's just a part of one piece of the entire model. and if you exchange parts, then that is usually not gonna work. There was another one somewhere. Very professional. This is how you make videos. But here you see again, there's parts of the equipment, and the same one is here with the pistol and everything. So it's not easy to just say, okay, I want to swap an arm, or I want to have different legs on this guy, or whatever. Yeah, it's not gonna work. Or it makes a lot of work, depending. The other thing that I noticed, pretty much all of the guys from starter boxes have these shoulder guards, pauldrons, the power armor here, these parts already molded into, while this guy here had them separately, and that's a little bit problematic if you want to swap those, because yeah, try to cut those off and replace them, and if they are separate, it's of course a lot easier. And I think it should be, because you can buy different shoulder pauldrons for different armies or different factions. Like, for example, I have a couple of those for the Raven Guard that have the Raven molded into them, but yeah, you don't get them on this model here, which is a shame, but okay. I could use the other guy, obviously. Take one of those off. Actually, maybe I should do that. But yeah, it gives you less flexibility, I would think, or it demands a lot more of crafting and building and sanding and filing. On the other hand, this allows for very good fit, and they very often have put the parts of the model onto the sprue in a way that the mold lines are somewhere where you don't see them. So even if you forget to scratch off some of those, they are usually very nicely hidden. And the same with the seams where you mold, where you glue those parts together. That's usually very discreet somewhere. Like, so the leg is somewhere, oopsie, the leg is somewhere attached here, and somewhere here there's actually a tiny little gap here, but it doesn't matter because you don't see that. So that's a big plus for those single pose models. The good thing about this video making is that you look at those models and yeah, like the main characters on stage, and you have your light source and try to make that look good. But at the same time, you can just check where the highlights would go and where the shadows are. So I just use a normal torchlight here, because it's very easy to move it around, obviously. And then you can see where the light source is and where you might want to have your highlights here. You can even darken that down more and more and more, and then, you know, make a note in your mind where the highlights are and where you would have to paint those. And here we go. 2 lieutenants, or 1 lieutenant and 1 lieutenant, so good for both sides of the Atlantic. And I prepared some of those plasma weapon folks as well. Some regular guys, so because I thought if I do all this stuff here, this is 1 sergeant actually, then I could just make a group and just, make them a unit. Which means we continue with painting now. Oh, what happened here, you might ask? Well, that is Charlie. He didn't press the like button, so I just ripped off his head.